Hello, I am the Mando. I'm new here on YouTube, and during the second wave of coronavirus here in the UK, I wanted a creative, passionate output, and basically here it is. I just decided I want to discuss my thoughts and hot takes in some discussion video essay format, here on YouTube. These are my opinions, by the way. I'd love to hear other opinions, other takes. I'm by no means presenting these as facts, simply my opinions. I'm sure many of these things have been said before. It's just my personal take, and get some discussion going in the replies or the comment section, and just let's get into the video. I've loved Star Wars ever since I first watched the prequel trilogy as a kid, and have always thoroughly enjoyed it. I've phased in and out of knowing pretty much everything that's happened, and the sequels have always felt rather strange to me. On initial watches, I loved them. I loved how beautiful the movies was, how long I waited for them to come out, and just sitting in the cinema and the experience of watching them. But only upon a second rewatch I didn't personally enjoy them, and I've always wondered why is that. At first I genuinely thought it was just how Disney makes Star Wars content, but after Rogue One and the TV shows and the books, and we've very much clearly seen that they can make quality Star Wars content. So I don't necessarily believe it's a Disney issue. I just believe it's the way they make their blockbuster movies. I just want to go over why I believe they don't personally hold up so well, and why they don't quite match up to the rest of Star Wars. Is it the way the movie's designed, the way it's written, or has the sadness that these movies are what they are and they can't be redeemed? There's no hope for another movie in the Skywalker saga to change it. Has that just finally hit me? I don't have hope for future movies. I don't have the enjoyment anymore watching them I did have in the theatres. My first theory on why I sat down in the cinema, hyped and initially enjoyed it, and then later on my Blu-ray thought, God, this is awful, is just the way the movie's filmed. The movie prioritizes scenes that work, the flashy trailers, plot twists that get hashtags and trendings on social media, good-looking sets over a cohesive story. And all those things are good on their own, but all they are is them prioritizing looking more appealing, grabbing the audience and drumming up hype over creating actual substance in that process. It feels like they're forgetting. It's has Hollywood moved on from trying to make new stories and instead wants to press money from initial cinema sales with how eye-catching a trailer is, create social media hype, get initial rents on their streaming services. You see this a lot with the Beauty and the Beast, Lion King remakes Disney does. It's all cashing on nostalgia and flashy CGI and not actual substance anymore. And especially with how Star Wars in the sequels sometimes prioritizes the spectacle over the story. It's very obvious, and I'm gonna go into my theory about spectacle now. YouTuber Lindsay Ellis, popular video essay cinematographer, knows a lot about this sort of stuff. And I got this first idea from her discussing why you can't remember anything in Michael Bay's Transformers, and I'll link that in the description. She goes in better detail than I could ever understand on how the flashy fight scenes, grand sets, are massive pieces that you're absorbed into, you're distracted, that hide a flawed story that you don't remember. The sequel films don't have resting moments you can relax like the originals, the prequels, the TV shows, The Mandalorian. They don't have that. What they have is a spectacle flash that requires your attention from planet to planet, with the scenes, especially prevalent in Rise of Skywalker. Each planet has a panning shot of your characters walking far away from the ship, and then panning shot over the grand vista it's presenting you. And each shot of the characters in space in that ship is hectic. You don't have scenes like in the original where you had Luke just chilling, or in the prequels where you've got people like just talking in the ship. It's hectic, it's intense, it's busy, frantic shots that you can't focus on or remember characterization because there is none. It's designed to look hectic and exciting for trailers and excite you in that cinema. We don't have moments where our eyes can rest. In a scene that is meant to wow you, in turn you get exhausted upon an initial rewatch because you've already been wowed, you know what's going to happen. The bare bones, uncharacterized scene is just there. It's prevalent, and it's all you can focus on. And I'm sure many Star Wars veterans that were naive as me probably could easily notice how there is no characterization resting scenes. It's just, look how cool this CGI is, look how great of a scene this is, it looks good, it should be good. But it's not. You can really see this in how the most memorable moments in the sequels aren't from the quotes or the characterization, they're from the aesthetics of the fight scenes, where things are set. Ask someone to recall a moment from The Last Jedi and it's the flashy hyperspeed crash scene or the speeders flying through Crate, and the politics surrounding the movie do not count as the most memorable part. No one's gonna say Rose and Finn's relationship, or Admiral Akbar's death, or Rose freeing the animals on Canto Bight. Even some of the side characters can be completely forgotten. For example, can anyone remember the name of the guy that betrayed Rose and Finn for money on the First Order ship? I've seen that movie like 5 times and I have no memory of who he is. Compare that to the originals or the prequels, which have character-focused moments where we have a break, we can focus on our characters. It's not all, look at this, look at this. The aesthetics aren't at the forefront, it's the characterization, the personal struggles. At what point does the over-reliance on look how beautiful this CGI and the computer-generated scenes really hinder the viewing experience? Because fans don't remember quotes or the story beats, they remember the settings, which it's no means a bad thing to have good-looking visuals, but when all you have is visuals upon rewatches where you're not wowed by this, it's the flaws are so much more noticeable, and a weak story and weak story elements can be seen, and the movie falls apart upon any rewatch, which many a Star Wars fan has done, myself included. They're just easier. You're no longer distracted by the beautiful vistas of how amazing the hyperspeed crash scene is. On a rewatch you're like, this changes everything. Either way, you end up in a position where any positive connotations you had with the movie in the cinema are obscured because you've become desensitized to the aesthetics of the movie. You can very easily notice, and a tired audience, which is what we are, can see that. My second theory as to why these films just weren't fun upon my rewatch is how painfully obvious it becomes that they didn't have the balls really to follow through on any of the new ideas that they presented between movies. Granted, this can be chopped up to the backstage drama of directors and staff changing, but why not stick and power through the new ideas presented and develop them further? I'm sure the story wouldn't even be nearly as hated if whenever they tried something new they didn't kill it off almost immediately. And this change where they backpedal on the new aspects they've gone for is so obvious between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. The Force Awakens plays it rather safe, almost playing out like A New Hope, just a bit spicier. It introduced some fantastic new ideas I would have loved to have been explored. For example, Finn was a wonderful idea. He gave a face to the stormtroopers, some newfound sympathy, a new idea to be explored not seen in Star Wars media before. He could have opened up a new moral grey, some real questions to be answered. But what they ended up doing with Finn is they played him safe. They didn't go any complicated routes. He doesn't question the years of his conditioning. He goes straight to being one of the heroes, straight to killing his old comrades, his old friends, which he knows better than anyone else, is equally as scared of a child soldier he was, especially as we know he isn't even the only deserter, or one who thinks of deserting in this very same trilogy, and by extension in the same movie that humanizes the troopers. They're treated as disposable and their lives used for comic relief by the other heroes, and it feels rather jarring. I was really looking forward to him make some character growth, and he got sidelined to a side character. His own heroic sacrifice got screwed up and ends up spending the remainder of the trilogy screaming for Rey instead of doing something that contributes to the story. And then they just chuck him onto the new female character that can be a love interest for him. And it's really sad how his character had so much potential, yet they didn't want to do anything with that. He ends up becoming the reason so poorly thought out side characters have a reason to be there, like Rose and I think it's Jana. Another concept that were hyped up was the Knights of Ren. They were hyped up in Force Awakens. Kylo Ren, this new guy, he's not a Sith, he's the leader of the Knights of Ren. And they were completely forgotten about in The Last Jedi. And all they did in The Rise of Skywalker is stand around ominously. They don't serve a purpose, other than to sell action figures, it seems. I can't think of a single reason why their inclusion was even needed when they die in a matter of a minute or so in Rise of Skywalker after standing around and doing nothing.
Does anyone else remember the pure hype and discussion and the theory surrounding Snoke when his first appearance in The Force Awakens came out? The possibilities of a new species, a dark side of the Force entity. It was really intriguing, and we've really got no explanation for its existence other than Snoke being in a test tube for like one shot in Rise of Skywalker. So what really is he? Is he a failed clone of Palpatine? There's not really a concrete explanation for what the hell Snoke is. His death was unexpected, sure, and changed the formula and made Kylo seem much more threatening, and I wasn't opposed to it, thinking the explanation for his death and who Snoke was will eventually come, and that's still yet to see. But it really seems rushed and unthought out, like they needed some way to connect him to the already forced and rushed Palpatine inclusion in Rise of Skywalker. And speaking of Palpatine, like, really? Like, we all know he comes back in Legends, and I'm pretty sure we was tired of his returns in Legends as we are tired of his return in the movies. It's nostalgia baiting and just an easy solution instead of writing a good brand new fresh antagonist or improving the one already in the sequels like Kylo. It was just them doing, let's just do Palpatine for the nostalgia and not even build up to it. The way it was just chucked in at the opening crawl. I remember being sat in the cinema as it played thinking, did I miss a book, a game, anything, or did I miss a scene at the end of The Last Jedi? It seems like they couldn't be bothered or want to take the risk of a new antagonist. They just couldn't and didn't want to take the risk of making Kylo truly threatening or fleshing out Snoke and making a new threat. They just didn't want to take that risk.
I want to get into some of the more controversial characters in this trilogy. For example, Rose Tico. Now, she certainly has her flaws. But honestly, I liked her inclusion, and I had hoped her character would have developed a bit more, or even redeemed herself in the eyes of most viewers after the reception she had in The Last Jedi, yet they didn't bother with her. She was a backgrounded character that Finn ignored first for Rey and then the female clone of Finn in the last act, making Rose and Finn's love interest plot pointless. They made her not matter at all, and it's sad that they saw everyone's thoughts on her of not liking her character, and instead of going, we're gonna make her character good now, they chucked her into the background, which just makes her character even more worse. And sure, it's less risky than trying something, but it's miserable. Speaking of controversial characters, Admiral Holdo. Everyone has an opinion on her, and now I'm not going to debate all the politics that Twitter created about her. I just want to talk about one aspect of her, because I don't really want to get into everything. One line in Rise of Skywalker, when one person asks in a strategy meeting before the battle at Exegol, is, we should try the Holdo maneuver. And someone responds with the most infuriating response, with, that was 1 in a million. Now, if that move, where she turned around and smashed into the First Order's capital ship, was 1 in a million, wouldn't that mean she was using the last part of the ship's fuel to retreat by herself, jump at the opposite end of hyperspace, and leave the Resistance to die on Crate in the escape pods by themselves? And she just got really incredibly unlucky, messed up her hyperspace calculations and smashed into it. Again, it just seems they saw the way the people reacted to the character and what she did and how it changed Star Wars, and quickly wrote it out so they couldn't do it again to avoid fan outrage, but in the process discredited her character, her supposed heroic actions, and turned it into an act of selfishness. And this no longer makes sense story-wise, and it's a confusing message to the audience, and it shows a weakness in their story, and I really don't like that. I don't like that instead of buckling down and going, nope, we are making this a thing in Star Wars now, they said, let's ignore that forever now. That didn't happen because you didn't like it, and it makes me so angry. So angry. Okay, so she was set up as a nobody, and then they changed it, it feels like, to Palpatine. It doesn't feel like she was set up as Palpatine. It doesn't make sense. After the build-up of her being related to no one, and it turning out she's related to Palpatine, it really destroys the message of The Last Jedi, with the Broom Kid scene where anyone can be anything, and it makes the main moral of that movie obsolete. It feels like they backpedaled and hoped more people will like Rey. If she's related to a character everyone else likes already. Even more so, it feels like it's Disney fulfilling the Disney movie quota of, there needs to be a big plot twist to blow people away in every Disney movie. But sometimes it's just not needed, especially if you implement it rushed or misplaced. Also, side note, how did she recognize the ship in Rise of Skywalker from her childhood? Like, aren't they mass-produced? Like, it's like looking at a taxi that you were once in as a kid and just going, I remember that taxi. I feel like her ending story as Rey Skywalker also didn't do her character justice. She didn't really like Luke and knew him for a few days, and it just felt like another way of them trying to make it so fans liked Rey. I would have personally liked the line, Rey, just Rey. It would have fit her character more, her arc more, accepting that she's her own person. She is her own family. And that's quite a nice message, like, she doesn't need blood family.
and would have shown some real development. Or even doing what Luke and Leia did with accepting their Skywalker lineage and relation to Darth Vader and have her say Rey Palpatine. Her mirroring the original movies in that way could have created some nice links and really would have been a nice message of her embracing her name. And just because you share the blood of someone who did terrible things doesn't mean you are terrible. You are your own person. Is such a nice message that they missed out on, really. Now, this is one of my personal pet peeves that I've not seen really many others talk about, and that's the choreography in some of the fight scenes in the sequels. Not the aesthetics and the way it looks amazing, but when you look at how the people move and how the lightsabers hit, it doesn't match up. Okay, now I know the original trilogy doesn't exactly have groundbreaking fight scenes. The Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader fight scene is quite miserable compared to the others in the series, but it was great at the time, don't get me wrong. But each movie since then has been drastically improving the combat scenes and how amazingly they work and their flow. After the lightsaber scenes in the prequel trilogy with the forms of the lightsabers defined and the TV shows like the Clone Wars, it really falls flat looking at them. I wonder if anyone else feels the same. I mean, other than taking place in good looking areas and the scene with the Praetorian Guards, it really falls flat. I mean, Rey really has no training, so I suppose that can excuse her for not using any cool fancy lightsaber battle techniques during her combat, but she can really already do everything else with the Force, so I don't see why she can do some exciting combat. Take Yoda versus Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, with Yoda jumping around and Palpatine in the Senate room, or Maul versus Ahsoka at the Siege of Mandalore in the Clone Wars, and then just compare that to Rey versus Palpatine, the final fight scene in all of the Skywalker saga. It just doesn't feel as good. It's miserable. It isn't satisfying. It makes me feel depressed. Alright, as the final fight scene of the entire saga, they should go all out like the scene in the prequels between Obi-Wan and Anakin, but it doesn't even come close. Even the scene between Rey and Kylo on Starkiller really falls flat. Aside from Rey being either far too skilled for her level or Kylo being far too unskilled for his level, it kinda doesn't work. The fight doesn't work. How does a skilled fighter like Kylo almost lose to Rey? Or how does an unskilled fighter like Rey keep up with Kylo? And even then, the fight is just, there's not really any tension aside from what's happening to the planet. It's just hack and slash. They just aggressively push forward and then they clash with the blades instead of techniques like we see everywhere else. And Kylo should know these techniques. He was trained. The scene looks so flashy with the lights and the snow and the background elements and everything being destroyed, but the characters themselves feel so uninvolved in the fight scenes. It feels amateur. Take a genuine look about how Rey and Kylo move their lightsabers in all three movies, on the Death Star fight scene, anywhere. It's especially obvious in the dramatic shots where they show and they zoom out, and it's just Rey swinging instead of the particular skill we see everywhere else in Star Wars media. Anyway, from someone who really enjoyed these movies when I first sat down and has defended them many times, I really felt compelled to make this sort of video and just want to maybe get my thoughts out there and hear some other opinions and see if you agree or disagree. And I really didn't even get into my thoughts on Captain
Phasma, or the C-3PO and Chewbacca fake-outs in Rise of Skywalker, or the many other issues I have with like law breaking. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. This video is long enough already, so I really thank you if you've watched the video until now. I appreciate it, and I really want to like try and make more videos like this. So subscribe, give me some feedback on this video, and give me some thoughts. Like, I want to hear some genuine, what were your thoughts, debate me. Anyway, okay, thank you for watching, and adios.